All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another BuzzBeat episode. I am going to be joined by three co-hosts today: Brian, Darian, and Spencer. Have you been relegated to correspondent now? Is that what you called yourself the other day?
Yeah, I just kind of self identified as a correspondent for the time being, or for the foreseeable future. We'll say that. Yeah, life's gotten a little crazy, and you guys don't need me. You know what you're doing, so I'll pop in every now and then. But it's great to be here. It's been a long time. It's good
I,
to see your faces and hear your voices.
I was thinking of it more of like a professor emeritus role, Spencer. If you were like willing to take on that title and that type of prestige.
We can discuss offline, but that has pretty good ring to it. So
Yeah.
so yeah, no, but yeah, I'll be honest. Looking forward to the episode. Not as plugged into the draft prep as I have been in the past, but so I'm cramming a little bit, but excited about today. And again, good to see all your faces.
Darian, have you potted before with Spencer or no?
No, I have not. So I was going to say, nice to officially meet him. I'm excited to have a lot of good Hornets talk.
I thought maybe I'm not right in my mind. I thought at one point, Darian, we had at one point, but
We did. It might.
we
It was
had, but maybe not.
Maybe it was like the very first time I came on, but at that point I didn't know everyone. I really just knew Richie. So
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you on the team as well. So
you.
welcome and yeah. So thanks for having me on your program, Richie.
If you guys have ever potted before, it clearly was not memorable because you guys don't remember this. But we will go ahead and get into the episode here. And the way that this is going to work, it is a mock draft. We had the 5 previous picks before the Charlotte Hornets pick at number 6. And we're going to talk about the available options. So let me run through the picks real quick. The Atlanta Hawks went with Sarr. The Washington Wizards at the number 2 pick went with Zachary Risachet. The Rockets went with Reed Shepherd, and the Spurs went with Rob Dillingham. And then right before this pick, Donovan Clingan was selected with the 5th overall pick in this mock draft episode. Real quickly, Brian, Spencer, Darian, any of these guys surprise you that they went in the top 5 if this is the way that it would have panned out in a week and a half time?
Klingon at top 5 doesn't surprise me. Going to the Pistons is what surprised me. I know a lot of Pistons fans talk about how Jalen Duren is not the defender that specifically probably Hornets fans think he is. I can't back that up, but it's an overwhelming amount of people. So with that being said, I guess maybe I'm not as surprised, but still, I thought the Pistons would definitely go Buzelis. So Klingon to the Pistons is the biggest surprise to me.
Yeah, all these picks look pretty par for the course. But clinging to Detroit, yeah, I agree with Darian. That's sort of an interesting one, just given we're only 2 years removed from Jalen Duren, being a late lotto pick for Detroit, and a guy that I think has shown through 2 seasons like a fair amount of potential. Like I'm still pretty bullish on him. He's still very, very young for a guy heading into his, that'll be heading into his 3rd year next season. And it kind of already feels like the Pistons are in a weird spot with how some of their young guys fit already. So if you were to add like another, positional overlap or sort of like logjam to the mix, that might complicate factors already. But Klingon's obviously a great prospect. So like him going top 5 is not like a huge shock.
Yeah, I mean, Dillingham at 4 is, and I see we just got a comment from everything Buzz City kind of agreeing. I mean, I like Dillingham as a prospect a lot. Like he's an electric scorer. He's definitely going to play a role in the NBA, but like, maybe a little bit of a one-trick pony, microwave scorer. This seems rich for me, even in a weak draft. The rest is pretty scratch. I like Klingon a lot. So, and then obviously 1 and 2 are what everybody's expecting. I kind of have weird, like Reed Shepherd. He does everything. There's no wasted motion. He's a good defender. He's just a robot of a basketball player. Just has the best feel probably of anyone in this draft, and is probably just more like pro ready, just in his like preparation and how he looks on the basketball court. But 3 is pretty high for me too, I would say. So I'm down on the Kentucky guys just a hair at 3 and 4. I wouldn't have them this high.
Yeah, it does seem like Dillingham is slipping a little bit. But I still think the creation upside that he has beyond just the scoring, like I like the passing, the skip passing. And when Darian and I did our scouting pod, we talked about his off-ball offense some too. I mean, he's small. He's going to be a problem for you defensively, but there's a chance he could actually be a pretty special offensive player. And if you think he's the kind of guy that makes sense with Wemby, like you could probably get him at 8. So maybe 4, you don't go for him there. But I don't know. I'm not, from like a sheer offensive talent standpoint, I can still see in this draft like a top 5 grade on Dillingham.
Yeah, I almost wonder, like Dillingham was the one guy that kind of stood out as potentially being overdrafted here, in my personal opinion. And then Klingon just going to the Pistons does feel a little bit odd, but maybe they were thinking best player available and kind of taking the Klingon route there. Okay, so what we're going to do right now, just kind of looking at the guys that potentially could be there for the 6th overall pick. If there's anyone on this list that you would like to talk about or consider, but I feel like if this is the way that it went down, these would be the guys that the Hornets would be looking at in no particular order. Cody Williams from Colorado, Buzelis, Devin Carter, Nikola Topic, Steph Castle, Dalton Knecht, and Ron Holland. Is there any other guys that would be in consideration here for the 6th overall pick, or is this kind of the crop of players that you guys would expect?
This is about what I would expect. I mean, maybe Salon out of France, maybe just because big, forward shooter type. But there's several players here that I would take above Salon, So, but he's a guy that I think could conceivably make some sense for Charlotte. And given his youth, he's still just 18 years old. 6'9", 6'10". Can shoot off movement a little bit, has some tools and some upside, maybe him. But I think for the most part, without really doing a whole lot of checking and stuff here, this does seem like a pretty solid list that, that Charlotte could pick from in this mock that we're going on.
One I would add is Jacoby Walter from Baylor. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily for me exactly, but he is one of the few confirmed players that have worked out for the Charlotte Hornets. So if maybe it's not at 6, the Hornets are looking at him. So maybe they, if that's their guy and they know he's not going to get picked top, let's say 10, they trade down or something like that. Or, in NBA circles, he may be valued as high, higher than what most of us think. So that could be someone they look at 6. But I'm not 100% sure, but just off the fact that he is one of the confirmed workout participants, I would probably add him to this list.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Darren took words right out of my mouth. Jacoby Walter was the one guy that I kind of had circled as a possible jumper on draft night. And, I haven't done a deep scout on him, but I watched a few Baylor games last year and he pops. I mean, I think he's going to be a good pro. He's got a lot of skills. He's got good athleticism. I think he can be a two-way player. I think he's going to be a solid NBA pro.
All right. Well, let's just kind of talk about a couple of these guys. And I don't know if we'll come to a consensus with this mock draft pick because we were texting back and forth earlier this week and definitely some varying opinions here. Spencer, I actually want to start with your guy because, we haven't heard from you in a while on an episode. So we'll start with Dalton Knecht and tell me why the pitch to make Knecht the 6th overall pick in this scenario here is the way that you would go. I get the shooting. I get the pull-up shooting, the three-point shot. I get the talent on the offensive end. But does the age or the defense not scare you away?
I mean, of course, the age, and maybe the lack of defense scares me away. Like, look, I watched Sam Hauser play defense at UVA for a season, and I thought this guy won't last 2 seconds in the NBA, and he's probably going to win NBA championships tonight and be a contributor. And now, I'm hearing NBA media heads saying that you can survive with him on the court defensively. I just never would have pictured that. I think filtering or fitting in these ancillary players that have very high level offensive skills into the NBA defensively in a much more like, let's say, liberal defensive scheme is easier than it is in college. So I would not read too much into his defensive liabilities, would be case number one, to start with the negatives. Of course, the age is a concern. So then you kind of move to what his strengths are: offense, shooting. I think he's a better athlete than he gets billed for. I think he can be a creator in certain situations, maybe your third creator, fourth creator, depending on kind of the lineup he's playing in. And kind of my case really, Richie, is, Charlotte just turned over their entire front office coaching infrastructure. And if I were making the final decision, I would want to start with a win. And I think Dalton Knecht is going to be a good pro, not going to be a great pro. He's going to be a good pro. He's going to be a good utility player, whether he ends up being a long-term starter in the league or a guy that comes off the bench and, can give you 12 to 14 points, whatever, in 25 minutes. He's a safe pick, and I honestly believe that's what this franchise needs right now. I'm sure that all these new heads in the front office and the coaching staff trust their infrastructure and trust their resources, but I'm here to tell you that's not how it starts. No new thing that just changed that much is going to start that smoothly. And it's, they're still figuring things out. And I think what they need to do is draft a player, especially in a weak draft like this. And you guys are going to make the case for Buzelis here in a minute. And he's definitely has a much higher probability chance to be a better player, number one. And he's like, 3 years younger or something? Maybe, it's much younger. So I totally get it. I wouldn't be upset if he was the pick. But I think the Hornets they just need to hit a single, I think. And they haven't done that a whole lot, in the past 10 years or so. And with this brand new staff and infrastructure in place, I think that even elevates the importance of getting somebody on base, for my terrible baseball analogy I'm going to keep going back to, just to kind of build the mo, right? Get everybody feeling good. All right, we got Dalton Knecht in here. All of a sudden, his rookie season, he's scoring 15 points a game. He's not going to be a great player in the league, but he's going to be a good player. And now we're going to extend him at a very fair number. And I'm looking at it like economically too, because in 4.5 years, I think that probability that Charlotte has him on a really good extended contract and maybe one of the most valued assets of that rookie class in the league is it's going to be better than a Buzelis, I would say, if you ran it through a computer 100 times. So it's kind of a boring, I'm not swinging for the fences here, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm trying to take the player that's going to come in here, be a contributor, and like I said, that I know I'm going to be able to keep on a pretty fair number because he's not going to be a star, and he's older, so that's going to hurt his leverage too. And now I have a really good asset, moving into his second contract and know that he can contribute. So, and I just like Knecht too a lot as a player. With the Miles Bridges situation, we don't know where that's going to go. He's not a direct replacement of what Bridges does, but he does give you a little bit more depth at that position if Bridges walks or is signed and traded this offseason. So that's just kind of where I am. But I do like Buzelis. I really do. Wouldn't be upset if that was a pick. I would just lean Dalton.
Darian, what are your thoughts on Knecht and how far down your list would he rank among these guys?
So I actually really like Knecht. For me, I still have not been able to pinpoint this is the one guy that I really want. So I have it kind of broken down into tiers. Knecht kind of falls into tier 2, but tier 2 for me doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad player. I only have 3, sometimes on certain days, 2 players in tier 1. But I like what he brings. I agree with everything what Spencer said, that he is a very, kind of what you get with him. And I think that's the beauty of it in this draft, because of the fact that there's so many guys. So I can literally pick every single person on here and say, you hope they will eventually do this. Dalton Knecht, I don't really think there's anything you'll say that he hope he can do, maybe outside of defense. But even then, I don't think you're drafting Dalton Knecht to hope that, to him to be a better defender. Same as I mentioned when we were talking about Rob Dillingham. I don't think you draft Rob Dillingham, hoping that his defense or something happens. You draft him because what he can do right now, and you hope that gets better. But he's showing all the signs that he can. Same with Dalton Knecht. His offensive game, he shows that he can score at a bunch of different levels. You just hope that, that side of his game matures. I don't think you're really looking for him to be better as a defender. Compared to everybody else, the only reason to me he falls into tier 2 strictly comes down to, for the longest, I was hoping that the Hornets were kind of entering there, and I like to call it the Cam Johnson stage, partly maybe because I'm a UNC fan. But when the Phoenix Suns drafted Cam Johnson, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's too high for. Why did they draft him?" But then you saw how it turned out for the Phoenix Suns, where he ended up being a very solid role player. They knew exactly what they were doing. You can also refer to Keegan Murray, where everyone thought the Kings were going to draft Jaden Ivey, but they got Keegan Murray instead. And it was because they felt as though we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We just need someone solid. We have our guys. The reason I don't feel that way with the Hornets anymore, you have LaMelo Ball coming off an injury. You have Mark Williams, I like Mark Williams, but we honestly still haven't seen a lot to make that kind of decision of, can he be the anchor of the future? And we don't know what's happening with Miles Bridges. Maybe we could lean that he's going to come back, but we still don't know for sure. There's a lot of things, a lot of new changes that are going on. And I think that the Hornets may necessarily not be in that position as I once thought they were, in that position of where let's take the best available player, or not the best available player, but a guy that we, feel like is a very solid player. We kind of know what he does, and that's what we need him to do. I think that they might need to go a little more upside, because I think we're further away than what we hope to be. I hope I'm wrong in that, saying that, but I will say my kind of order of how I feel about some of these guys would change if I felt as though the Hornets were, they needed that one guy. But as of right now, I just feel like we're a couple of guys away, baby. And a couple of those guys could be on the roster. It's just that we haven't seen enough of them to be completely sure of that going forward.
BG, I know you're about to jump in. I just want to add one more thing that I meant to mention, and Darren reminded me. But, now that you have and the reason I kind of like Knecht better than some of the other players that we're looking at, specifically Buzelis, though, is, you have LaMelo Ball on this, max extension. And you've got him under contract for numerous years. And, Charlotte's not in any rush to do anything with LaMelo right now, as they should not be. But yes, I agree that the roster is probably not close to being, a serious 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. But they do have to put the best team possible around LaMelo Ball, now, right? Now, because if he's not going to be a long-term solution in Charlotte, I'm not saying that's the case, but if he's not, you have to put the best possible product around him to find out that answer, whether that be he is, or whether that be we want to max out what this guy does on the court and does for the franchise so we can keep his value at his highest level possible. So that's one of the other reasons I kind of earmarked why I like a guy like Knecht, and I'm just not as worried about the draft age. Charlotte's roster is just in this very weird situation where I think the general consensus is we're far away. But when you have a max player on the roster, you really don't have that luxury. I know that might seem like the reality, but when you're sending out that kind of money to one player, that's kind of not the reality.
And possibly two with Miles Bridges if he comes back and paying good money as well.
Especially because
owe it to yourself to try to build something that resembles a winner.
And especially because what Miller probably projects as a max guy too, right? I mean, I know we're kind of early, but it's you may have two max guys on the. I mean, Miller there's plenty of runway to work with, but this stuff happens quickly. Knecht, his shooting and his movement shooting would be a really would fit in some cases very nicely, I think, around LaMelo and Brandon Miller. You think of all the kind of cool ways they could use those three guys together, get split action with Miller and Knecht working off ball with one another, different kinds of pistol action setups where Knecht is the screener and he's slipping out, and just getting more shooting on the floor. It feels like that could be a thing that could sort of help put a good roster and a good a team that's sort of like set up maybe to try to get the most out of LaMelo sooner rather than later. I sort of worry about those three if they are your like perimeter trio going forward, not just because of the defense, but also just because like I'm not sure there's like a lot of like rim pressure from that group. Connect actually got to the rim a fair amount at Tennessee this past season. Like he was a legit 4-level scorer, maybe the best in college basketball this season. He was really, really good. And his game against Purdue in the NCAA tournament was like one of the best prospect games from a college player this year, I feel like. But I could just see there like that group having some limitations that could also be like detrimental to intermediate and long-term outcomes for both, LaMelo or Brandon Miller or whatever. I guess part of that would be related to like what are they doing with Bridges too. And yeah, so I don't know. For me, I think I side closer to where Darian is on the spectrum here of just like having. I know this is a down draft, and it's missing what is an obvious defining franchise talent. It's missing big creators on the wing. Like there's like these sort of things you're always looking for to sort of determine the high end nature of a class, and they're shaky at best here. But I still think a top 10, a top 6 pick, I'm still thinking upside and potential. And because I think there are going to be guys that are going to be slipping to the Hornets at 6 that do have upside, guys that you could not just like feature in the offense, but run offense through potentially. So I don't know. For me, I still think like Knecht, if he were the pick for them at 6, I wouldn't even be totally mad about it because I think there's a lot of creative ways you could integrate him, and he could be used to help the team in terms of half court offense. But I just think you're leaving for a team that is just starting to like reset on this rebuild with a new staff, new front offense, young people, on the staff and in the front office. Yeah, it feels like if there were a time to sort of like take a like slightly more patient approach, that I don't know, that should be something that gets factored into like evaluating sort of like picks at 6 for the Hornets.
Yeah, and this comment here in YouTube where it says the draft is fit over talent and potential. And I think this year out of any year, I feel like I struggle with this debate because the playing field is so level. I think if there was a more standout player, maybe you do go for that upside and potential. To Spencer's point, his pitch about, LaMelo being a max player, that the time is now. You want to get in a guy that doesn't have this upside, but more so a guy that you can kind of plug in right away and be an impact player. Let's shift over to Buzelis, the guy that I feel like if I had this crop of players, I would probably lean his direction. Again, I'm probably not the one that you would lean on in terms of draft content here on BuzzBeat, but I'm very intrigued about this guy, and this player would obviously fit more on the upside range here. His positional size, his versatility, I think that's going to translate on both ends of the court. He's very much a connective piece that I think would fit right in with what Charles Lee is trying to do. I think he's underrated athletically. He can get up off the floor with ease. And if the shot comes around, which I think it will, at least come to league average, I think you've got a player that can be in your top 7, 8 players within a rotation consistently for a playoff team. But again, he is more of an upside swing than, say, Knecht. Darian, I know that you and I are kind of on the same page when it comes to Buzelis and kind of where we rank him. Make the pitch better than I did. Why Buzelis should be the pick at number 6.
No, I think you did. I think you did a good job because I do believe he's underrated athletically. I do believe that the shot will come around. I understand that when you watch his game, you see some parts of it and believe that it's a little raw. As far as he does have an ability to handle the ball at his size, but it's not really as refined as you would like it to be. So it's like, what good is it if it's not refined? Especially considering the situation we're in, which I really like what Spencer brought up about LaMelo's getting paid all this money, potentially Miles Bridges getting paid all this money. Grant Williams is not as much as everybody else, but he's still getting, like, we have players who are getting paid on this roster. So do you want someone who has all the potential in the world, but not quite there right now? But I do feel as though what Buzelis is able to bring is something that, with a solid team around him, with a team like that has LaMelo Ball, that has Brandon Miller, that has, we're going to keep assuming just Miles Bridges with the team. You have a guy who could be your potential fourth option, but he's not. He's more limited than he was at G League Ignite, because we know G League Ignite, they kind of just have them run out there. But with having Buzelis as your fourth option with these particular players that are in front of him, all of them need the ball. He cannot have the ball, which I think will open up his game, because now you have him in the corner. Now you can, maybe have him come play a role where he's kind of like the liaison between the starters and the bench, or whatever. He can, maybe if he's coming off the bench, he can play well with the starters. If he's a starter, he can kind of transition to, help the bench out, because we know our bench doesn't, as of right now, doesn't have too many creators outside of maybe Trey Mann, who sometimes is a little reluctant to do so. So I think he could be a good connector piece, but having a guy that's 6'8", without shoes, with 6'10" with shoes, that can create for himself, possibly create for others, because he's a little bit underrated as a passer as well. I'm not saying he's this tremendous passer, but he's able to find an open man, which I feel like that's a very low hanging fruit. But we see in today's NBA that a lot of people struggle with that. So having that guy kind of be your fourth option, but he could potentially be, your third, let's say, because the Miles Bridges contract is not going to be forever. I don't think, even if they, do resign him, I don't think it's going to be, he's the future. It's more of like, he's kind of the gap. I was about to say bridge, but I'm not going to play off his name, but he's kind of the gap between, the LaMelo, Brandon Miller I think LaMelo's there, but more so Brandon Miller, trying to find himself into the NBA. And then, okay, now we're the leaders, we're running the team. I think once they kind of reach that point, Bridges might, fizzle out. Then you can bring in Buzelis if he reaches his potential. And that's the biggest thing, is the if. But I do feel like right now he's able to help out because of the fact that he has a lot of talent. He's not going to be asked to do too much. And he does a lot of things that we necessarily kind of need. I think we've talked about it before. The only person on our team right now that has size that can shoot is Bertans, and we've seen him on defense. So it's just like, while I don't think Buzelis, I think Bertans is probably a better shooter than Buzelis. He might, Buzelis may never even get to close to what Bertans have done in the past. But if LaMelo's healthy, Brandon Miller's healthy, Miles Bridges is healthy and committed, because that's another big thing for Miles, you have a guy who is like a, let's just say a Bertans, but can also put the ball on the floor, who also could be a weak side defender, who also can sometimes, in certain lineups can be, man in the paint. Because we know with Grant Williams, he does it with strength. I think Buzelis does it he's really good at just kind of finding the ball and blocking it that way. He's not going to body you up, but I think he makes up for that by kind of just being a smart defender. I hate to put it that way, but that's just kind of the best way to put it. So
he does take really good angles blocking shots. Like, so
that's kind of
that absolutely is a strength of his.
Right.
And and he blocked a lot of shots with Ignite this year too.
Exactly. And then his foul rate is, like, considering the amount of blocks he got, he only has like 2.5 fouls a game, 3. So it's not many considering the amount of shots he's blocked. So it is a lot of hope. I know I said a lot of like, you hope, you wish, but it's just that if it does work, he doesn't have to be the best player in this draft for him to be successful for the Charlotte Hornets. And that's the beauty of it. It's still, though, the hope. You're still hoping. So it's not like Dalton Knecht, and maybe even, a couple other guys you can add. It's not as we know exactly what he brings, and he's going to bring it. I have no doubt that Dalton Knecht's going to be able to shoot at the NBA level. I have no doubt that he's going to continue bringing his 3-level scoring to the NBA level. It's just a matter of, okay, we need a little bit more. So that's kind of just like my pitch for Buzelis.
Yeah, Carter and Knecht are the two guys where it's like,
right,
what's on the menu with those guys. I do think, and I mean, Devin Carter's awesome, and like he's a guy that I hope the Hornets, consider at 6 as well. I really like him as a prospect, but with Buzelis, I do think there's a pathway for him to one day be like a third option on a team. Like, he can score in the mid range. We've seen those little turnaround baseline jumpers plenty this season with Ignite. Like, he has some of that mid range scoring package. He is a good athlete. He has good burst. He has good flexibility. Like he's better, at getting downhill and attacking the rim against the bent defense than he is just sort of like sizing someone up and trying to go right by him. But like he can do it, and to have that in 6'9" frame, 6'10" frame with some of the sort of passing skills that he brings. Yeah, there's a guy that there's the chance he turns, one of his outcomes is this is a guy that you can play on both sides of the pick and roll. He scores for you at a couple of different levels. He helps you at the rim on both sides of the floor. And yeah, he can be a featured player, and his connected passing just sort of helps you in both transition and in the half court. So I like Buzelis as a prospect, like in general, and actually think he would make quite a bit of sense to the Hornets at 6 as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Buzelis too. I said it earlier. I certainly would not be upset if he was the pick. It seems like he's going to be an impactful defensive player in the NBA. That's like the one unquestionable, I would say, translatable skill for him. I'm sure that he can get stronger. I'm sure he can put on weight. You look at his frame, and I don't know that he's 200 pounds at 6'10". So, he's got to work on his frame, but that'll happen, I'm sure, in a strength program in the NBA. The offense is obviously like the big question mark, but to Brian or Darren, I don't remember who made this point earlier, but having him off the ball is probably unlocking like his best utility on that end. From what I can tell, he's a good cutter. He's a guy that kind of understands where to be off the ball and how to read the help defense. I mean, he seems to have kind of an acumen for that, which is really, really important at his size. And I agree with you, BG. Like he's definitely a very, very good prospect, especially in this draft, and could turn out to be. I've thought of a few comps, but I won't share them because it's probably going to sound stupid. But I mean, like at his size, with his offensive potential upside and what he should be able to bring, just in terms of like rim protection, rim pressure on offense immediately. Although he, might look a little sloppy in the first few years, just trying to get his feet under him. There's no question. There's potentially something special in there. So again, it's not that I don't like Buzelis as a prospect of why I make the case for Knecht. I think I kind of made my case earlier, but also Richie, you said something earlier about Buzelis being a good connector, and we could spell that KNECHT. Yeah, so we got that one too to go along with Darian's bridge analogy. But yeah. I mean, look, the way this draft has rolled out, this mock draft, this is an exciting position for Charlotte to be in. Like you could talk me into 4 of these guys that you had up on the board earlier, at least maybe 5, Richie, and I would pretty much be happy with all of them. We haven't even talked about Topic. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, but he's the one guy I think in this entire draft at his size with his creativity and just the ability to make stuff happen on the ball. Be a distributor. A pretty average to above average scorer. Like we haven't even talked about him, and I would have to consider him here too. I think if I'm Charlotte.
Absolutely. Like the injuries in the most recent injury definitely make things, a little cloudy with him. But I think there's a chance he ends up being the best player in this class. You know what I mean? And to Spencer's point about this, Charlotte being in kind of a decent spot at pick 6, I'm at this list that we have assembled in front of us with Topic and Holland. You have 2 guys that at some point in the last 12 months have been mocked as the number 1 overall pick in this class that could very well. And to be clear, like if not for the injuries, I don't think. Topic falls. I think he probably is a top 5 pick if he's healthy at the moment. So yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, look, the fit with LaMelo could be kind of weird, but man, he gets into the paint. He's got a great first step. He can pass. He's really good at understanding angles too, just like a really clever scorer, live ball scorer. He's a guy that if he's there at 6, I think Charlotte has to consider him because that's one of the levers you could pull to try to find some like real like upside, from a playmaking standpoint at pick 6. And we talked at the start of this, right? We talked about Dillingham and Shepard and how those guys are they're smaller, right? Well, Topic isn't. He's 6'6". Like this is a big guard who's got a good first step and can get into the paint. And again, is like pretty smooth finishing around the hoop and like has lots of little tricks in his bag already. And I believe he's going to be the youngest guy to get picked in the draft too. So I would by no means like he's absolutely someone you have to consider. You'd have to do your research on the injuries. But if he was the guy at 6, knowing that he's probably going to miss some time next year, I still think that's a pretty exciting talent add to bring into the mix for the Hornets.
Yeah. And I think, Castle, we really haven't mentioned much on this episode, if at all. And I think out of all these guys that we're looking at right now, he might have the one skill that is the standout skill that translate the quickest, and that's on the defensive end as a point of attack defender, just being so relentless on that end of the court. Now, Brian, of these players, I know that Darian, I don't know if he's really committed to saying Buzelis, but it feels like I'm Buzelis, Spencer is Knecht. Like if you had a decision to make, which one of these guys would you choose? I feel like I know where you're going with this, but go ahead and give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this a lot the last month or so. Because for a period, like sometimes it ends up being Castle. Now considering Topic, like you have to factor him in now too. But I do think like I think I would go Ron Holland at 6. I really, really like Ron Holland. I think he's arguably the best athlete in the draft. I think he was in a really bad setup with G League Ignite this year. That's same with Buzelis, same with Tyler Smith, who's another prospect that I like, and a commentator just mentioned him a few minutes ago. But Holland, he's 18 years old. He's strong, good athlete. He can drive and get downhill. He can be a very impactful defender on the perimeter. He's got weak side defensive chops, being as a rim protector or guy that's digging in on the backside. And I just think he would be a really nice fit with LaMelo and Brandon Miller. That said, he really struggled shooting the 3 this year. He was about 25%. And like, if he doesn't improve that drastically, and if he doesn't clean up some of the decision-making parts of his game, then he's going to bust out. Right. You know what I mean? So by no means am I claiming Holland to be a sure thing, but in terms of if you're looking at all these guys, and if you're thinking in terms of what would be the like best case scenario fit with some of the guys you have on the roster right now, I think Holland has the chance to really be like a big time two-way player in the NBA and also fit with LaMelo and Brandon Miller. But maybe I'm missing something because like he's really slipped a lot like the last few months in a bunch of different mocks. So, and I guess maybe that's the 3-point shooting. Maybe it's the decision-making. I think he had a lot on his plate as a guy with near 22% usage this season on a G League Ignite team that was kind of a mess. Because he does show real flashes as a pick and roll passer. He does show the ability to catch and go and get downhill or to get downhill to his right. And he's got a good motor. Like it's not like an effort thing with him. Like he plays really hard. So if I'm missing something, then it will come to bear as this guy enters into the NBA. But for right now, I remain like a little confused as to why exactly he's continuing to slide this much.
BG, here's what, and I didn't watch one G League game last year, so this is all like, literally going off YouTube highlights. But the one thing that really sticks out to me, he's an incredible vertical athlete. Potentially the best one in this class, probably the best one in this class. Moving on the floor, his first step, like I don't see it there as much. Like his first step was like shockingly poor to me, I thought, with the basketball. And it's always weird with those guys that are such incredible vertical athletes, but then when they have the ball in their hands, they have to make a decision with the ball in their hands or get it on the floor and get past their defender. I just saw a guy that couldn't do it. So does that sound accurate to you, or you're seeing something different? Because I think that could be part of the reason he's slipping.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some questions with first step and handle with him that I think are something that has to be brought into the fold with him. Overall, I come out like feeling pretty good about the first step. And as far as the handle goes, like there is some craft. Like Darian, you and I talked about this on the pod we did on him a month ago or whatever. But like he can get skinny and get into gaps. He's got that little Euro move that he uses. So maybe the first step isn't super bursty, but I think there's like enough there to say that it's maybe not a weakness necessarily. Yeah. But look, like he's one of those guys. He's going to need, if you bring him in, he's going to need reps. He's going to need time because like this is not. I don't think he's ready to come out and just deliver like big time two-way impact next season. But if he gets stronger, he gets more used to contact. Like he was already pretty physical with his drives in Ignite this year. But I think if he could get even better with some of that stuff, he has the chance to, again, be like have a high ceiling at that at the wing spot. So overall, I think the lower body strength and quickness are good. And I think for him, it's maybe just finding a better way to like sync it up with his upper body. Maybe if that's sort of like one of the things that's causing the first step to maybe like be like a little hit or miss sometimes, because like I think there's the potential for it to be there, but it's not like Topic just gets by guys. He just like he steps, boom, he's gone. Holland, maybe not quite to that extent. They're different players, obviously, but I think that's something to consider for sure.
I think for Ron Holland, I feel like one of the reasons his first step may not just be as quick as I think he just takes too long to process it. I think he is very reliant on his athleticism, and when it doesn't work right away, it takes him a little second to kind of figure out what move he's going to do. And I think, Brian, you mentioned it when we did talk about him, he gets stuck in between moves. And so it caused like a little hesitation. So
MKG, sweet.
Better than that.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to pick like a pinpoint, and it's just been really, really difficult for me. That's why this year is one of those years where I just had to break it into tiers about how I feel about certain people. Ron Holland is also in that tier 1 for me, because I do like everything he does. And it helps that, and I think I mentioned this before, it helps that he has someone like Brandon Miller kind of playing alongside him, because Brandon Miller makes up. Now, granted, Brandon Miller, I feel like, makes up for a lot of things a lot of players may not do correctly, but specifically Ron Holland, I think he highlights Ron Holland's weaknesses. And I know as we saw Brandon Miller, he can get to the paint. We saw him have his ferocious dunks throughout the season, but Ron Holland, that's his game. And so I feel as though they can kind of play off each other. I think it's going to help out a lot, especially having LaMelo Ball, give him the ball. We saw Ron Holland kind of try to run the offense at times. And to me, I think he suffered from, and I always like to say this for players like him, like 19-year-old syndrome, where it's like, I'm just going to do everything. I'm being told I'm the number one prospect. I think I'm the number one prospect. So therefore, I'm just going to try to do everything I possibly can on the court. And I think, guys don't realize, especially you're 19, you don't realize how hurtful that can be. And it doesn't help that he got injured. And I think he could have came back, but he chose not to. So we really didn't get to see maybe the growth you would for a player who went to college, or a player who even just played a whole season, because he kind of voted to not continue playing. The other person I feel like we haven't talked about, and I just briefly want to talk about him because I see a lot of people talking about it in the comments, is Cody Williams. To me, he's good. I actually don't really have a problem with him, but he will probably be, as I mentioned earlier, the Cam Johnson, the Keegan Murray, and there's probably plenty of other examples. Not for us, because I think he doesn't do enough to be that for particularly our team in the way we're kind of, put together. But there's going to be a team that pick him, and everybody's going, oh, how did everybody miss this guy? And it's like, that was just a perfect scenario for him. So I think he's a good player. He actually does a lot of the things that we need well. 3-point volume is not as high as I would want it to be. The defense is good, but it to me, it's more of his physical stature that makes him such a good defender than what I see him being a good defender. He can stay in front of people. He does the basics well, but it's not worth drafting him. Like he's not a Stephon Castle who
he's not super
hounds
sticky, right? He's not super sticky. He's not Castle or Beekman or Carter, right?
Correct.
But he's also
I don't even think he's Ron Holland in some
Yeah.
areas. How Ron Holland can disrupt the offense as well. So it's just a little iffy about him. But I guarantee he probably will go to if he goes to the right team, everybody will be like, how did they pass up on this guy? If I really had to pick right now, I know last week I did say Buzelis, or maybe that was like earlier. It can't have been earlier this week. Today's Monday. But I probably, man, it's between Buzelis and Holland for me. The third person who usually ends up in that tier 1 for me is Devin Carter. He falls in there as well. He plays a lot bigger than what he is, but his height is a concern because we've seen guys in college play, they're like, oh, they play so much bigger than what they are. And then they get to the NBA, and that's where the size really, really makes a difference. So I don't know if we'll be able to see him average 1 block and a steal and a half a game at the NBA level.
Bouknight was one of those guys. As soon as he got on the court for the Hornets, it was just apparent how small he looked.
Right.
It was just it was jarring, honestly. But to your point about Carter being able to play bigger, he had a 6'9" wingspan and 42-inch vertical leap measured at the combine, which I believe was the best or one of the best numbers there too. So special vertical athlete with long wingspan. But yeah, you're right. Like he's like 6'1", 6'1", 6'2", which by NBA standards is pretty small.
And I'll admit, like maybe I'm hurting from seeing LaMelo and Terry try to do it for so long, and then we saw that eventually get exposed at times. And they're completely different players, but it's size to size at the end of the day. I would probably have to. Oh man, I probably would have to go Holland just because of the fact that I think if you get what he does now, which is attack the rim, kind of just be that guy that can create opportunities in the fast break. I don't think there's anything you have to hope for with him. I mean, you definitely need him to shoot more and shoot better. But as far as if you put him in right now and have him running with this team as a team that likes to run, we've been through 2 coaches and that's kind of been our thing. I don't think that's going to change with Charles Lee because we have the personnel to do so. I think Ron Holland's the best for that. And he does show the tools of being a guy that can defend. So if you got a guy that can run the floor well, and defend and kind of make the cuts. He showed that he can shoot at times. It's just you want him to shoot more. You want him to be a lot much better shooter. I think he has what it takes. There was a reason he was number 1 for a long time. I don't know why he's falling. He seems like a very confident guy. He seems like a guy that is, I wouldn't say full of himself, but he's a guy who knows what he can do. Could that deter teams after not playing half a season? Maybe. Could that deter teams considering you can't shoot? Maybe. But overall, I think that he just has what it takes. And there was a reason everybody wanted him kind of to be the guy for a long time. He has the talent. And what he does well, specifically for the Charlotte Hornets, I think translates to what we do. I definitely would want him to be a better shooter. But at the end of the day, if he just ends up being a guy that can slash and attack the rim and be a very good defender, which I think he has everything to do so, you got what you asked for. Yes, you need more shooting, but you can find shooting in other places. I don't think you can find a guy that can impact the game the way Ron Holland can.
All right. I guess we'll kind of leave it open-ended here, but based on the voting, Brian and Darian have 2 votes in Holland's favor. Knecht 1 vote with Spencer and 1 vote for Buzelis. We just need MJ to come in here and just override all of our thinking.
Armando Bacot.
Yeah.
Harrison Ingram.
Yeah,
who played college basketball in the state of North Carolina that was special.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap here. Thanks, everyone, to joining us today for this episode. Please let us know how you would have approached this mock draft, how it played out in the first 5 picks. For Darian, for Spencer, for Brian, I'm Richie.